You just looked at it and you're like,
changed over to. All right, we are back. So I hope all of you had a chance to talk with one another and enjoyed a little bit of extra time. This morning. So does anybody want to share something from their table? Did anybody collect any quotes? Any quotes online? Quotes to fill in your budget worksheet from the first session? Okay. Anybody get any quotes?
Like $400 to, what do you call it? Finish my, the drywall in the garage to paint. And it's a small space.
Oh, do you know how many square feet approximately?
Oh, God.
5 to 6, about 500.
Nice.
Two car garage.
That's great.
And it seemed really low to me, but somebody said that's because that kind of work is like that.
Okay. Great. Thank you for getting a quote and sharing it. That's wonderful. Do you feel comfortable? Well, maybe in the break, if people are interested in finding out who that quote was from, you can ask Janice. Sure. Does that come? Oh, yes. Okay. Totally. Great. Anybody else have a quote that they want to share? How about the table? Was there a certain type of ADU that most folks at the table wanted to build? No. Was it all
We didn't
different?
talk about that.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
What did you talk about?
We talked about our individual desires for what we wanted in an individual, why we're exploring it.
Yeah, great. That's great. Awesome. So like the motivation for building.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. How about middle table? Did you all talk about like the types of ADUs that you wanted to build, or did you end up talking about something a little different?
We ended up talking about garages in a big home, and some of it is, what's the motivation of doing something.
Oh, nice. Great. What, was there like a common motivation in your table, or did everybody have different reasoning for wanting to build an ADU?
Some of us who were saying we wanted to move into it eventually and move out of the bigger house.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, how would you characterize that? Like, why would you want to move out of your bigger house and into the smaller house?
Well, speaking for Amy and me, it's because we got bought a big old house, 25 years ago, and raised a bunch of kids there, and 30 years ago. And now we don't have the kids, and it's a big house and it needs a family. And so.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. But you like your neighborhood and your neighbors, and yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else want to share about their motivation for building or something that they talked about in their group? No?
I can all of the above. Place for my parents, in-laws, we have a 1-bedroom house, so extra bedroom, work from home space, rent it out, short-term to people who need like a place to hold over till their next place, maybe long-term eventually. What other ones am I forgetting? Yeah, basically you name it, and we've put it through our heads to use it, move into it so we can work on our house. That was also why we decided to go for the garage build before diving into our own house, because our house is so small. We're like everything touches everything, and if you start on it, you feel like you're not gonna be able to live in it. So we could work on our house if we couldn't live in there. So yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Gail, did you want to share something from your table about motivations that you all had?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Somebody else can talk now.
I think they're all kind of financial motivation.
Oh, interesting. All right. Beth or Joe, do either of you want to share a little bit from your conversation about what you talked about?
Sure. I own a couple of different pieces of property in Livingston, and they both have garages on them or attached to the buildings that are on those. And I want to convert the garages into long-term affordable housing or workforce housing. So that's my driver.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Awesome. Well, I would love to keep having this conversation with all of you, but I think we got to get on to some of our other content for this evening. So let's briefly review session 2 goals. Just establish a basic understanding of permitting considerations and processes within Park County and the city of Livingston. Build an understanding of the key considerations related to site planning, which we're going to talk about a lot today and has a lot to do with design. And then increase awareness of existing design resources, of which there are many, and increase awareness of design considerations related to fire protection, energy efficiency, and accessibility. So without further ado, I am gonna move into some of our content around permitting, and I just want to thank City of Livingston Planning Director Jennifer Severson. You want to give a little wave? Park County Sanitarian Scott Conley, who's in the back. Both of them will be talking here in a moment, and Park County Co-Director of Planning and Certified Floodplain Manager Lawson Moorman for the content in this section. Lawson couldn't be here tonight, but he gave me some information that I am conveying to you. So basically, if you have questions about that, I'm going to direct you to Lawson and Mike at the county planning office. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about some considerations if you are in the county. So who here has property in the county where they're thinking about building an ADU? Show of hands. I hear. Anybody else? Okay. Sweet. We'll come up in just a second. So some general questions to guide your ADU permitting and design process. One, is your property zoned? We'll talk about what that means shortly. Another is your property served by a water and sewer district, or do you have a well and septic system or something else? I don't know, like rain catchment barrels. How are you planning to use your accessory dwelling unit? Are you in a floodplain or a floodway? And then are there covenants and or deed restrictions on your property? I'm not going to go into detail about covenants or deed restrictions, but you might be on a property where those exist, and you can find them through the clerk and recorder's office. Or if you have an HOA, you can ask them about those. All right, so specific considerations for the county. One thing that Lawson Moorman asked me to share with you are considerations around the floodplain and floodplain permitting. He is a certified floodplain manager, so this is an area of expertise for him. And in general, there are a couple of tools you can use when you're trying to determine whether your build site might be in a floodplain. So you'll want to start with the Park County Interactive Zoning and Flood Hazard Map, which is linked at the lower right-hand corner of this screen. So you can go back into the slides I sent and click on that link. And what you'll see is this main image on the slide here. After you turn off some zoning layers, if you want me to show you how to do that, I can do that during the break. Or you can just mess around with the map. You'll still be able to see these flood layers regardless of whether you turn off the zoning layers. It'll just be a little clearer if you do. There are 2 basics that Lawson said you need to know about considerations around the floodplain. One is that no new structures, including accessory dwelling units, are allowed in the floodway, which is indicated in the light blue on the screen. The second is that new structures are allowed in the floodplain, also known as the 100-year flood zone, but that comes with a 1% annual chance of flood risk, right? So that area is shown in purple on the map. So again, you can choose to do that, but that comes with risk in the county. And that also comes with requirements, which are that you have to build 2 feet above the elevation from the bottom of your floor joist to the base flood elevation. So Lawson will be able to help you determine what that is, but that's basically the 100-year flood elevation. So you'll have to raise the structure up out of harm's way. This can be done through a variety of means. You can build your 81 piers. You could put fill underneath. Lawson can walk you through that. But again, I want to reiterate that this comes with risk. And so one great way to avoid that risk is just not mess with building in the floodplain. Building in the floodplain also comes with a $300 permit. I think that is increased to $500 if you don't get it before you build your structure and you request it after the fact. So if you think that this might be a consideration for you, please reach out to Lawson right away. I have included his and Mike Inman, the planning director's contact information on a subsequent slide. Even if you're not in the floodplain or the floodway, Lawson also recommends that you check out the Yellowstone River's Channel Migration Zone map. That is linked in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. And I included a screenshot of like a PDF composite map. And this was created by a consulting firm and on behalf of the Yellowstone River Conservation District Council. And the map depicts areas where the Yellowstone River is likely to move over time. The study identifies area with low, moderate, or high risk of erosion as well. So that might be something you want to consider. Lawson also said this map could indicate the quality of the substrate that you plan to build on. So if you're in the channel migration zone, your substrate might be loose aggregate, which I have never tried to build on, but has anybody ever tried to build on loose aggregate in this room or online?
So it doesn't sound very stable.
Yeah, exactly. So
The fact that you don't care.
yeah, not, thank you, Jennifer. So not recommended. The link on this slide will take you to a primary page. Yeah, Scott, we'll get to you in just a second.
Well, I just had something to add to your floodplain. You cannot put a septic field in the floodplain. So that's another consideration in the same area of talking about is if you are planning on building a floodplain, you're allowed to build in the floodplain, but you can't put your septic field in this floodplain. You have to be 100 feet away.
In the regulatory floodplain, because the regulatory is the purple here, but you can put it in the 500 year, right?
Yeah.
The
You have to
non-regulatory.
be 100 feet away from the 100-year floodplain.
Great. I'm just going to repeat that so the mics pick that up. You cannot put a septic system in the 100-year regulatory floodplain, although you can build a structure in it. So keep that in mind as well. If you're interested in the channel migration zone map, I can talk to you a little bit more about it during the break. When you go to the interactive map that's available through this link on the slide, it includes a lot of acronyms. I won't take up your time going through all those acronyms like right now in front of everybody, but I'm happy to walk you through them later. All right. Another key consideration is zoning, as I mentioned. So I've included that same link to the Park County zoning and like flood hazard map at the top of this slide. And that's where you want to go to determine whether your property is zoned or not. When you open it up, you'll see a little dialog box pop up showing whether your property is zoned and how it's zoned, and including links to the zoning regulations for any zoning districts you're in. If you're in the county and located within like 3/4 of a mile of Highway 89 or East River Road, you're probably in this big weird zoning district that's called US Highway 89 South East River Road Old Yellowstone Trail District. And that's pretty much just a sign ordinance. So if you want to put a sign up, that's the one you should look at. It doesn't include other provisions. However, you might actually be in another zoning district, as is the case with this random property that is depicted on the screen. There is this little green zoning district right about East River Road and Mill Creek Road called Paradise Valley Zoning District. And I pulled some of the requirements from that zoning district and put them on the screen here so you can get a taste of what you might need to think about if your property is zoned. So does your zoning allow for accessory dwelling units or more than one dwelling or maybe a guest house? Because your zoning regulation might not say that accessory dwelling units are allowed, but it might say that things that sound like accessory dwelling units are allowed. So you want to check with Lawson or Mike about that. And I've added some additional questions for you to help figure out whether your use is one that's allowed by the underlying zoning. Are there any setbacks from your property lines, public roads or common setbacks, ag ditches or water courses, which include the Yellowstone River or creeks or streams? Sometimes there are building requirements, even though there's no building department for the county. Sometimes building requirements are snuck into zoning regulations, and that is the case for the Paradise Valley zoning district, which requires Class A or Class B rated roofing. We will actually get back to this point later in our discussion of wildfire hazards. But they also have view shed protection and they have restrictions on mobile and manufactured homes. So again, these are design considerations that you need to be aware of when you're planning your ADU, because if you're planning on having a mobile or manufactured home and you're actually in this Paradise Valley zoning district, those are going to be prohibited. There might be a way, just putting that out there for you. I've also included a link to the zoning permit application for Park County if you need to go that route. I don't expect many of you will, because many of the zoning districts in the county are very, very small, but just in case you do. Fees vary by zoning district and range anywhere from just $50 for an accessory structure zoning compliance permit to $350 for a conditional use permit in the Orea Creek zoning district, which is a very small little zoning district up on the way to Bozeman Pass. So again, this is something you'll want to check with the county planning department about, and I included the link to their fee schedule in the slides. And the contact information for the county planning department and Mike and Lawson on the slide. And again, this information is in the slides that I sent out this afternoon, so you should have all of it in your email address. All right. So sanitation permitting. Scott, you want to come on up and talk to us a little bit about some key considerations? Yay.
I guess most of what I have to say relates to county rather than city. So it might be boring, but the kind of rule of thumb that we tell people that are looking to build additional dwelling units or build it really anything on their property is how many acres do you own? If you're under 20 acres, there's a very good chance that your property is regulated by a certificate of subdivision approval, which it comes from the DEQ when you subdivide a property, and it tells you how many places you're allowed to build, where your house has to get built, where your septic system needs to go, sort of those fundamentals of building. And a lot of times people build their house right where their septic's supposed to go because it's the best spot to build. It's the flattest, requires the least amount of work. And we go out there and we say, where are you gonna put your septic? And they're like, well, that's what you're gonna tell us.
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to go right here, where your house is. So then they have to go through a DEQ rewrite process to find an alternate place for their septic system, which costs several $1,000s to $15,000 of additional cost on top. So it's important to understand your property before you build, and that's the planning process.
Very
I
nicely
don't know
said.
what else we have. This, I guess, for the city, folks, if you're gonna build an ADU, that's out of my realm, but if you're gonna short-term rental it, then it comes into my wheelhouse. So if you're gonna short-term rental your house or an additional house, then there's a plan review process to get licensed with the state as a public accommodation. It's not burdensome. It costs a little bit of money. There's a $125 review and inspection fee and a $40 license that is renewable every year. And for our part at the health department, we review the application. Typically in the city, there's not a lot to review because what we're looking for is a functioning septic system that's built for the proper number of bedrooms that you have on your property. We look at the COSA to make sure you're allowed to have a second house on your property. In the city, you don't look at if you're hooking up to the municipality and they have the capacity. But what we do look for, during our inspection, we look for certain, making sure that there's no, except you gotta remember that when the public is invited into your house for rent, that you're potentially exposing them to health hazards. If you're like almost all of us and we keep all of our chemicals under our sink. So we look for those sorts of things, hazards, making sure there's a locked cabinet to keep chemicals in, making sure that your silverware is washable, cleanable, you're not using hand stuff that's, melted handles and those sorts of things, but it's a pretty straightforward process to license a short-term rental. Yes.
Any idea how many unlicensed ones are operating right now?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot. We, the health department, did hire a third-party contractor to identify all of the short-term rentals in Park County a couple of years ago, and there's over 600 of them licensed.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, and we brought a lot of those people online. So a lot of people just didn't know. They're like, I didn't know I needed a license. And they wanted to be licensed. We're trying to push for is these companies that advertise for the states that they're advertising for require a license to require a license before they advertise. What's your license number? You're in Montana. You're required to have a license. What's your license number? But we haven't got there yet, most of them.
If the short-term rental happens to be in a large complex of condos and they've already been built to city specifications, is it still required?
Yes. Because it's not private anymore. It's a public accommodation. So there's a lot of those places out in Albertsons.
Yeah.
Are short-term rentals.
Yeah.
You know more than I do.
All right. Anything else that you would like to say? Did we get the fees right? Did I swap those accidentally?
No, that's right.
Okay, good.
I have a question for Scott. When you issue a permit, questions about issuing permits, when you do that, let's say there's 1,000-gallon tank, septic tank, and the people who are building the house plan to have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. When you write the permit, is there like a maximum number, like say 1,000-gallon tank is good for a 4-bedroom home? You put that on the permit, or do you just, since it's just going to be a 2-bedroom house, do you just put 2 bedrooms on the permit?
No, the tank size is on there. So the tank size and the lateral lengths are on there. So when it comes back to us, or if you built an addition, so you got a septic permit for a 2-bedroom house, that septic system is sized based on the number of bedrooms and the type of soil that's going to drain into you. So if 5 years later you sell the house and the new owner puts a 3rd bedroom on an addition, and they don't do anything, then they're in violation. And we don't really know that until it either gets short-term rentaled or it goes for sale. And you call me and say, I'm looking for the septic permit for such and such address. And we give it to you, and then we see the MLS that says it's a 3-bedroom house. And then that's when sort of the ball starts rolling. Like, you're in violation of septic issues with the county, and you have to disclose that to the new buyer. Or a lot of times the old buyer will fix it. Or the current owner.
They can do things like extend. I'm just saying that there are options.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm speaking from like, if you want to build an ADU on a house, say there's just 2 bedrooms, but the permit says, well, it's only good for 2 bedrooms. Is that always the case? Or sometimes if the tank's large enough, can you then go back and say?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking, like,
A
is it
lot of
always
people-
for the maximum amount?
Yeah, it is. It is. And if somebody comes, like, I just had an instance the other day that they're building a 2-bedroom house, but later down the line, they want to put a garage with a bedroom on top of it. So they're going to size their septic system for a 3-bedroom house. that will accept the additional dwelling unit. So it's a foresight, I guess.
Gotcha.
All right, I'm gonna keep us moving
Yeah.
since we're behind schedule. That was excellent. Thank you very much, Scott.
If anybody wants, I mean, we do lots of things.
Come on, Jennifer. All right, please welcome Jennifer Severson, City of Livingston Planning Director.
See, our stuff's a lot easier. We don't regulate, we don't license. We have no city restrictions on ADUs, so help yourself. Or on short-term rentals. ADUs, everything on here, by the way, is tailored except that one thing to what's currently in the.
That's great.
Okay.
You can just tell me
So,
what you'd like the next.
So accessory dwelling units, the way that the city's code currently defines them, and I'm just gonna, actually, I should preface all this with, we've started going through a zoning code update. I do not anticipate that our regs, which I'm gonna go through on accessory dwelling units, are gonna change significantly. I definitely don't think they're gonna become any more restrictive because the state has made that pretty clear. If anything, maybe they might become more permissive, but what I'm going to go over today is what our current code is and what I anticipate it's going to be for the next 14 months until we have a code update. So again, I don't expect this to change, but ADUs or accessory dwelling units are just an independent dwelling unit from, it's accessory to what they call a primary dwelling unit. It has to be on the same lot as a primary dwelling unit. If it's on a different lot, then it's a primary dwelling on a different lot, right? So a dwelling unit as defined in our code, again, is just one or more rooms designed for occupied by one family, living, sleeping. Nobody checks into this. It's basically for one family. If you were going to have more than one family, then for dwelling unit purposes, it would be like a duplex or a two-family. Typically, and again, this is not defined in our code. There's a lot of things that aren't defined in our code right now. But typically, when you think of a dwelling unit, it has its own bathing facilities, its own cooking facilities, including a range, not just like a hot plate. That would be like a dwelling unit. Doesn't mean for an accessory dwelling, you can't have a hot plate. You definitely have to have its own bathroom, right? Doesn't have to have a tub, has to have at least a sink and a toilet and a shower. So I would say that's the bare minimum your accessory dwelling unit needs to have.
So kind of similar to how lenders were defining accessory dwelling units.
I think so.
Awesome.
Where are they allowed in the city? I just squished together a lot more than I thought. Sorry. We just had, some of you may have known in the 2023 legislature, there was a law passed, that everywhere in the state, at least citywide, I don't know what was done for counties, but I imagine it's the same. Anywhere there's an existing single family dwelling or single family residence, those are kind of interchangeable. ADUs are allowed by right. That is already the case in our zoning code, or it was the case, except for one district, and that's the central business district. But now, if you're in the central business district, and let's say, sometimes people don't realize the central business district includes, not just where all the bars and restaurants and shops are. It's Second Street between like Clark and Geyser. That's all residential. Listen, I live on that street. It is all houses. There are no businesses. It goes over by the Shane Center. There's also just houses. So this is actually a really good thing to me because we were getting people that were frustrated. They had a house, they wanted to build an ADU, and our code said you can't do it in the central business district because any new structure in the central business district has to have a minimum of 3 residential units. So anybody that wanted to build 1 or 2, which we still need, wasn't able to do it. Now you are.
Yay!
Yay. The trick is, and this is, this is not state mandated. This is going to be going before the city commission. It was recommended through the land use board last week. We have, because our ADU ordinance was already pretty permissive, even compared to other places in the state, and we already allowed, in most residential districts, 1 ADU to 1 primary. as a by right. By right use means you don't have to go through any kind of special review. You don't have to kind of go through any kind of special permit. It's just allowed for that property. They don't apply. We are recommending that they are only applicable to single family dwellings. I don't want to go into too much. There's another law that went through in the legislature that just got taken off hold. There was a stay for duplex housing. Now, anywhere you have one single family residence, you automatically can have a duplex. And so we were concerned that people would say, okay, well, now I'm allowed to have my duplex, so I get 1 ADU for each. So where you used to have 1 and 1, now you've just doubled that density. We want that to be looked at a little more closely and discussed publicly with people in Livingston. The state did not say that we couldn't limit it to just 1 to 1. And so we're taking that approach. It's what we call, gentle infill. Basically, it's not doubling your number of allowable dwelling units everywhere. This will all be looked at during this code update. But for right now, since we have to enact the state statutes, we're enacting them. We're just simply saying that accessory dwellings only apply to a single family dwelling. So you can have it as attached and you could call it a duplex if you want. I wouldn't, because it's a duplex actually is 2 primaries. So you'd want an attached. I mean, technically under building code, it would be like a duplex. It would be 2 residences in one structure, but all the benefits now, which I'll go into in a minute, of ADUs apply. So there's definitely some benefits of that. The other thing I wanted to touch on, sorry, is if you don't have a single family dwelling on the property already, these are the zoning districts that ADUs are allowed in by right. So there's the R1, these are all primarily residential. R1, R2, R2MH, these all have different minimum lot sizes. In R1, there's a very small part of town by the river, over by 9th Street, 10th Street, at the name of the neighborhood, but the minimum lot sizes there are 7,000 square feet. R2, R2MH, those minimum lot sizes are 3,500 square feet. RMO is, we have 1 property that's zoned RMO in the entire city. It's residential mobile home community. And even though we have more than 1 residential mobile home community, we only have 1 that's zoned RMO. Mixed use is interesting because those parcels, I think the minimum lot size is maybe, is it 850? I want to say it's pretty small. So if you have, and the thing is, let's take R2. The vast majority of Livingston is zoned R2. That's medium density residential. And so if you have a double lot, you probably have 2 3,500 square foot lots. And there's a lot more of them out there than you think. If your lot is 50 feet wide along the front, you have a double lot in R2. It's very likely you do, which means that even though you might only have a garage and a house on there now, by right, you could develop another primary and 2 ADUs as long as they were like 2 and 2, not as a 4plex. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's it. I'm also going to put my contact information up here. I have to answer questions. There's some tricks to our ADUs, but I feel like they're pretty permissive.
Can I ask a question on that exact thing? If you have a double lot and you have 1 house on it, this allows you to have.
If you have a minimum lot size, if you have a double lot, right, that meets the minimum lot size twice for what our minimum lot sizes are right now, then yes, you can ultimately have 2 primaries and 2 ADUs.
Can you have 1 primary and 2 ADUs?
Yeah. Because that would actually be, so to be an ADU, it has to be an accessory to a primary. So if you had 3 units, it would either be 2 primaries and 1 ADU, because the other one would just be a primary.
And you can do that with the 2 primaries on both lots.
You have a primary on each lot, or if you
The
own.
primary is already across
Yeah.
both lots.
So, and that's fine. If you maintain ownership of that lot and you don't do a subdivision exemption and change your boundary lines, then
I
yes.
could put it, you could always change, okay.
Yeah. You can. So basically look at your lot. I would say this, unless you think you're going to be selling off or changing your boundary lines really soon. And we're seeing a lot of those come through, like, their property taxes are getting high. And so now they're taking, maybe they already have a house and they're adjusting their boundary lines on those two lots so that that house can be on one lot instead of across the property line. And then they can sell off the other one. So, but each of those two separately, you have one primary, one ADU. If you have it all together and you never are going to adjust the boundary lines, you're never going to sell, you actually could just have two primaries and two ADUs anywhere you want them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I've been clarifying. Oh,
How about I feel like we could really go down a rabbit hole with these questions.
Yeah.
How about let's let Jennifer get through the rest of her presentation? And then if you want to have specific conversations about certain lots, we can get there.
Yeah.
But I just want to keep us moving along because we're behind schedule, so.
Yeah, unless you're immediately planning on building two ADUs and another primary, I would say this is not something that you immediately need to be super concerned about. As Catherine's already said, ADUs can be attached, they can be detached, they can be contained wholly within the current footprint of an existing primary, like a basement unit. There are different size allowances for these. So if you are attached or detached, the max size ADU now allowed under the state changes that just went through, that we're bringing through our city commission in a couple weeks. The max lot size, the maximum size of an ADU is either 1,000 square feet or 75% of the total square footage of the primary dwelling, whichever one is less. So, if you're within the footprint, so you have a house and you have a basement and you want to convert the basement to an ADU and it's 1,500 square feet, it's fine. It could be, there's no size limitation on that. But anything that is separate from the house, even if it's attached, so a new detached or detached, it's going to have those size limitations. Again, it has to be on the same lot as the primary dwelling unit. Otherwise, if it's on a different lot, it's a primary for that lot. Right now, I will say right now, our code, the city code says that the ADU has to be to the rear of the primary dwelling. This is something that is going to be an issue. I've already talked to somebody, not in this room, I don't think, but that they have an existing small, like 500 square foot house, and they want to build a new house that's like 1,500 square feet, and they want to move into that and then make the current primary, the only one on the lot, their ADU. If that's the issue, come talk to me, email me, we can go through this. Also, if it's going to be a problem, the rear versus like if you're in the alley versus the front and you're going to have a hard time making the ADU be in the rear of your primary, talk to me because I have a feeling that that might change in the next 14 months too. We also encourage people to combine with other buildings. So again, if you could make it attached to the primary, that frees up a little space for parking. It also frees up some space for a yard. So it's great, but it's not a requirement. There are no parking requirements for ADUs anymore. So as with this new state legislation, we can no longer require, before we required one off-street parking space, we can no longer require that. However, I would strongly encourage you, especially if you were on the south side of the tracks in the older part of town, to try to find a way to park at least one vehicle for that ADU on your property. Because if everybody starts building ADUs and nobody puts parking on their property, the streets are just going to be a nightmare, but we can't require it. This is setbacks and height. So zoning setbacks and maximum height. On the left, you're going to see it's residential density requirements, and on the right, it's a commercial density requirements. These are all, whether the zone is typically regarded as commercial, like neighborhood commercial, highway commercial, central business district. For purposes of the ADU, it's two separate tables, but this is a residential use. So don't worry about whether if you have property in a highway commercial and you want to put an ADU on it, you can do that. It doesn't have to be in a residential district. So all of these on the left, the what we call residential districts, R1, R2, the R2MH, the RMO, the MU. These are the setbacks. It's table 3041 in our code. Along the front street, the first three R1, R2, and R2MH are 25-foot setbacks from the front. That's always going to be your largest setback.
And again, this is all in the slides that I sent out, so you have a copy of this.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's always going to be, look at your first one first, because typically that is your largest setback. So once you have that, A lot of times, like you'll see on the side where these, look under medium density, actually a pointer, sorry. The one that says 5 or B or C, this code is going to be rewritten because basically it's 5. There's some other things that, oh, I see why I didn't put them on here. It's the main thing to worry about, I guess, is just the front street setback. Max heights, those are also important to look at. You can look on this table and get them.
And confirm with Jennifer.
And you confirm with me for the first 3 on your residential, the R1, R2, and R2 MH. It says 27 feet or 34 feet if the roof pitch is greater than or equal to 3 to 12. Not really sure why it doesn't say 1 to 4, but basically that's just I mean, I'm no math genius, but so that's just basically that's your max height allowed. That is also ADUs don't have any different setbacks or height requirements. It's the same as anything in this table. It's for your primary or any structure. The one thing to note, if you are in those central business districts, and again, like let's say a street that's primarily residential, there is currently no height limit in the central business district anywhere. In the residential areas, in the downtown, if somebody wanted to build a 20-story skyscraper right now, they absolutely could according to our code.
And if you have the money to do that.
And if you have the money to do that, then prove it, you know, but currently that is being looked at as part of the code update, but there are no setbacks. There's no minimum lot size. It's kind of a free for all. So, the good thing is that you can get creative with your lot, especially not having that setback. Now that's the zoning setback. You would need to talk to the building department for building code setbacks, depending on where you put it. But for zoning setbacks, there are none. So yeah, I think, and then there's just this note at the bottom. This is very, very rare that I've come across. But any side setback that is adjacent to and in line with an adjoining rear setback within the same zoning district. So like you have those, some that are fronting on the side street and maybe one fronts on the other street and the rear and the sides abut. You just need to remember it has the same setback as the adjoining rear. Call me. Like you know what your setbacks are.
Next one.
Yeah. Utilities. So city utilities are water and sewer. I mean, you also pay for garbage, but for purposes of ADUs and planning, this is what you're going to look at. So just remember that for water and sewer, if your ADU is attached or within the primary dwelling footprint, you will be able to use existing services. So you do not have to make a totally new connection, separate connection to our lines. However, you may be required to upsize your line depending on how big of an ADU you're going to build and how many bathrooms are already in your existing home. That is something you'll need to, when the time comes, you'll need to talk to Public Works and they can kind of tell you what that's going to be. But we can no longer charge impact fees. So ADUs cannot require impact fees. You typically, and this is under applicable fees, tap fees for utilities. They're typically a few $100s, not the 6,000 plus you might look at for an ADU up until this latest state legislation.
And you should have the building permit fee schedule
Yeah.
on top of the stack of documents that you have in front of you.
Yeah, and that's really the applicable fee you need to be concerned with for the city. We don't do conditional use permits for ADUs, all the other things that Scott was talking about. We don't have that. We look at an ADU from a building permit perspective right now as any other building. So there's no discounts on it. There's no special charges for it being an ADU. It is just assessed building permit fees, the same as any other structure. If your ADU is detached just for utilities, you will need to provide an independent line, independent utilities. So you will need to run a line from that ADU to our services. Still can't charge you the impact fees, but you're going to have to pay to make those connections.
If it's detached.
If it's detached, correct.
Sweet. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, so Q&A, or we could take a little recess and if people have questions for Jennifer, then we could do the questions during the recess, but I bet Jennifer has to go.
No, that's fine. I'm recording that. So,
Okay.
so well, yeah, I know, huh?
I'm like,
Wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm recording. I will just tell you, I don't have any, business cards because, we just got a new logo and for some reason we have not ordered new business cards yet and I ran on my old ones. So I can.
your email is at the end of the slide deck. Yeah.
But
Pam has a question really quick.
Question because, so our house is on 3 city lots.
Okay.
The house itself goes across 2.
Mhm.
The garage that's been there since I discovered 1951.
Okay.
It was built from a barn that used to be on the property. Is on a second, it's on the 3rd lot. Let's call it the 3rd lot. So if we want to put an apartment above the garage,
You absolutely can, as long
to
as
pay
it
the
stays
impact
on the same, so you don't pay impact fees. We can't assess impact fees. You will have to pay to run a separate utility line, but the fees for hooking up for that are not impact fees.
so even though it's on a separate lot.
Yes, well, if you're building it as an ADU, then it's the accessory to that dwelling. If you end up divvying up those lots later, then that's looked at. If you want to try to keep it with that primary and you meet the minimum lot sizes for all 3 of those lots, you can sell it, but as long as all 3 are under your ownership or the ones that the structures are on, then yes, you run a separate line, and it's the ADU.
And so does that apply also if your house happens to be in the business district?
I'm
Like I have a house that's on 2 lots and the house is on one and the garage is on another. And we want to build a garage with an apartment on top, but our one house is in the business district and then all the rest of the houses on the street.
Doesn't matter about the rest of the houses. Your property that you will have an accessory and a primary should all be zoned the same thing.
Okay, yes, our 2 lots are.
Yes. So if your 2 lots are zoned the same, you don't worry about what anybody else is doing. And it's actually a benefit to you.
Well, when we built our addition, it was a little scary because they're like, oh, you're a business district. You can go anything you want.
So it's yeah. And so it's,
So it applies to ADUs too, except for
so
we shouldn't do it on
it,
employee.
so so we're talking about 2 different things. ADUs is looked at as a use, right? So it's you have single family dwellings, you can have commercial uses, retail uses, you can have multifamily as a separate use, single family. Those uses are some different, there's different districts, right? Like we just looked up that you can have those in. CBD, ADUs aren't looked at like, oh, you can have them here at this height or this. If you can have an ADU in the CBD, the ADU is allowed the same things any residential structure would be allowed.
Okay,
So
okay.
it doesn't mean it has to stay as small as your structure. Again, you could literally, well, it does, actually, I take it back because of the size limitation. But there's nothing I'm not gonna get too into, but just if you are one of those people in the CBD, we can no longer, and that is something I've read in the slides. We used to require that you deed restricted an ADU to remain with the primary in perpetuity, and that we waived 50% of the impact fees. Now, if you would like to subdivide, we can no longer deed restrict you to do that. However, if you subdivide and take your ADU off the same property as the primary, it becomes the primary and you then have to pay all the fees and you have to provide parking.
So we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The maximum size, 1,000 square feet or 75% of the primary, is that just for finished square footage? So the garage ADU combo.
It's just the ADU part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the garage below. Yeah, it's the ADU use, the area that's being used as an ADU. And if you're using a garage to park the ADU, we're not looking at that because we can't require parking. So if you're building upstairs and that's your ADU, whatever space is being used for the ADU, that's what you're looking at.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions?
What if we're also building a garage and putting the ADU on top of it? But the garage is gonna be for our too many toys.
So the ADU is the dwelling unit. Since we can no longer require any parking, we can't look at the garage. If there's no part of the dwelling unit for the ADU that's in the garage, we only look at what's upstairs that's being used as the dwelling for the ADU. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, the location where, I'm putting mine, there's currently an ancient garage with kind of a shed, workshop attachment to it. I really, really doubt that it stands 5 feet back from the alley. How, I mean, is a person allowed to use that same footprint, or if you're building something new, you have to set it back?
If you are building, and again, it sounds like if it's an ancient garage and it did not get a building permit, my guess is you're gonna have to remove all of that if you wanted to use the space downstairs. So, and that means the new construction has to meet the current setbacks. If you have a garage, let's say, that is in great condition and you just want to build the second floor for the ADU, but the garage that's in great condition does not meet current setbacks, you can build an ADU, but it has to be pushed back to meet our current setback. So one way you could provide parking on that property is you just shove out that extra couple of 10 feet, whatever, and make a carport from the garage. You get to park the ADU and you can meet setbacks, but we can't require it.
And Jennifer took the time to answer a number of other questions that you all submitted in your Google
Yeah.
Forms. And so those are typed up and on top of your handout packets on the table. And it's like City of Livingston ADU Q&A. So there are some answers about manufactured and mobile homes, incinerating toilets, legally non-conforming structures.
Gray water
and
is not a
subdivision.
thing either. It wasn't on there, but gray water, we don't do that. You have to connect to city water and city sewer.
Yeah. All right. Should we take a little break?
You did put my email?
Yes.
Okay.
Jennifer's email is going to be at the very end of this slide deck, along with my email and Scott's email.
And if you email me, I think it's an automatic, do you get an automatic when you're sending an email? Automatic response? Okay, I need to check that. Give me 3 to 5 business days because I am the planning department. So I have nobody else answering stuff. I try to get back a lot earlier. Email is definitely quicker for me to get back to you than phone, but in touch with your questions.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Yep. Can we stand a 5-minute break? Will that be sufficient? And then we'll come back for the last 30 minutes. I'm seeing some nods. Okay, awesome. We'll see you back at the top of the hour.
First of all, go Avs.
No.
Secondary. So just looked at the map. I am in zone R3. So what does that mean?
All R3 does is usually damage, right? R3 is for other purposes. It's just gonna tell you your minimum lot size.
Okay.
R3 is very small lots. So you have, my guess is,
I have 2.
okay, I was gonna say, I don't think anybody in R3 does any of those.
I have like 7,000. Well, 7,000.
How does your, so you wanna look at your property description and see how many lots. it holds.
Okay.
But let's say you want to. If you have 7,000, you have.
Yeah.
But email me
Okay.
if you want to know that, but that just means for every lot you have, you can have that many primaries. That many.
And there's no setback.
Again, it depends if there's an adjoining rear setback in the city district, so. You go to that table, look at it, figure out,
Yeah.
you send me your address and people ask me.
Well, maybe I don't have 2 lots. Maybe I just thought it was 2 because of the size.
I do not fathom that if you're in R3, the minimum lot size is 1,150.
It's that weirdness on Front Street.
I'm telling you, if you have 7,000, you have like 4 lots.
Well, I can look, but.
Just email me, send me your address. But yeah, the minimum lot size for R3 is 1,150 square feet.
And I think
Only one that's
like
smaller
the second have it everywhere else in town with the water in the
These are 1,100 square foot lots?
It was the blessing. It's a blessing.
Minimum lot size in R3, it doesn't mean means that, so this is from commercial lot.
This
commercial
change.
property.
Because we did get an alley with all the utilities.
It says lot 7.
Cost us an extra week of extra.
Okay.
Okay, so that means that it's. Send it to me, look at it. Again, R2 lines up really nicely, R3 does not, because there's all these weird.
Okay.
Like it was platted as those lots before we changed the minimum lot sizes.
Yeah. Is this like an old neighborhood?
Yeah, so
Okay.
just email me and I can tell you.
Okay.
Your stuff. So, sure.
So I'm in the Montague subdivision. House, 1,500 square feet. And thinking about building a garage and an apartment on it. I want the cost of running a new sewer line to be for the project. Catch the acreage. I could use the existing. So it's a 3-bedroom house. Can we do a 2-bedroom ADU and use the existing 4-inch line?
You don't, so.
It's like my son's dog. And it was like.
Like I tell you, you may have to pay, you can still do the utilities together, but you may have to pay if you want to use the existing.
Would you have a tree?
As far as. I like the perspective, if you're like attaching it to, you said your house is.
1,500.
1,500 square feet, so it actually would be. 35% of that, so that's the price of that. I'm sorry. 1,000 square feet. So 1,000 square feet, however you want to do it, you can have 4 bedrooms and 1,000 square feet if you want to. But again, that's a question for our public works.
Our business is selling.
Do that, what would trigger? So if you're gonna connect up and not have it, you may not need, you may be able to accommodate those.
So we're, the guy that's head of the sewer.
So Shannon Holmes, Public Works Department Director, water, sewer, trash, stormwater, stormwater.
It's for Shannon.
It's just, it's the other sort
So we've, and no, so I was like, you've already.
I was, yeah, I'm happy, I'm kind of.
So people are kind of hanging on to the money.
Um,
They're worried about.
And I've been chasing, trying to chase people down here, and I'm calling through. I'm happy to see, it's broadly sort of just like, it doesn't have to be.
no, that's. It's just, it's.
And I mean.
This
Is it still,
Yeah, I would.
Still chasing
Can get into this room? It gets very incredible. There really is I'll just come sit.
That just tells you where you have to. Honestly, right now, it's nice to give people information as much as possible, but it's probably easier.
we. Process of like building up.
Don't sign up
The
for
foundation, so I think we needed to.
You don't wanna like have everybody like, oh.
We're adding time.
Yeah.
That's structural. You get the right.
Did you have it like what traffic?
They could tell you because like
Location.
Okay, everybody, that was a very short 5 minutes. You're welcome to keep standing up. You really don't have to sit down. So, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, so
You got the resources.
Like that, right?
That's a plan. Yeah, building permit.
So thank you for being willing to take a short break. And I'm going to try and briskly move us through the second half of our programming this evening. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me after the fact and talk more about this. We're going to be using some of more of those papers that are in the stack that was in front of you when you sat down. So I recommend having those at the ready, and they were put out in order of their appearance in our slide deck. While I'm doing this, John is going to be writing his contact information on the whiteboard. So if you ended up wanting to talk to him, you can reach out to him there. So before I begin, I just want to thank many municipalities throughout California and Oregon, Headwaters Economics, and Yellowstone Bend Citizens Council for contributing to the content in this section. Let's just get right into it. So, as we have discussed over and over again, ADUs can be created in a variety of different configurations. Just quick show of hands, who's going to have a over the garage accessory dwelling unit? Who thinks they're going to go that route? Really, really high so everybody else can see you. Nice, that's a pretty good number. Cool, maybe. Who's going to have their ADU inside the footprint of their current house? Anybody? No. Okay, fascinating. Fully detached? Nice. Big show of hands. What other options haven't I asked yet? Anybody with something different?
A tiny home.
Oh, garage conversion. Yeah. Would the tiny home be like detached? Yep. Sweet. All right, cool. Well, there is a ton of design inspiration for small homes on the internet that I'm sure you can Google. But I wanted to share a personal favorite of mine, a YouTube channel called Never Too Small. And what I love about it is that most of these projects are retrofits for very small spaces, but some are new builds. And the videos are beautifully produced and they showcase small homes from all over the world. And the titles of the videos, if you go to their YouTube channel, not their website, include the size of the home they're exploring. So if you want to look for a home that's 625 square feet, you can find one. Anyways, it just might be a fun resource for you. So I just want to pull through this thread that started in the prior section on permitting about site planning and all the different considerations related to site planning. We've talked about dimensions and setbacks for the dimensions of your primary dwelling unit and your planned accessory dwelling unit. We've talked about zoning and building department setbacks. We'll talk a little bit about wildfire buffer zones. And we've talked a lot about existing site features, including existing structures. We'll think about how they relate to privacy. We'll talk about the sun's path. We've talked a little bit about natural features in terms of floodplain and floodway, the substrate that you might be building on. Transportation, you have to think about where streets, alleys, sidewalks, trails, and paths are, utilities, well, septic, etc. I've included on this slide an example of a site plan from the city of Oakland, California. I've linked it down here in the far right corner. So you can just take a look and get a sense of how site plans look and what they account for. I thought this one was nice and clear if you hadn't seen one before. So I mentioned privacy and how your accessory dwelling unit will interact with your primary dwelling unit. And this is a great image from the city of Los Angeles. They have a free ADU plan set, which is linked here and linked later in this presentation. But it shows the different ways that you might consider or configure a detached accessory dwelling unit on your property in relation to the primary dwelling unit, depending upon its use. So for example, if you are renting it out, either short or long term. You might try and give a maximum amount of privacy to the primary dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit, so they're really not facing each other. If they're intended to like have a conversation together, like one's an art studio, for example, then, you know, privacy is not going to be as much of a concern. So you'll see this zone in yellow here that shows they're kind of interacting. If it's an in-law suite, maybe you want a little bit of privacy. So it's sort of facing to the side. And then they have even another configuration for a guest house that offers more privacy than what you might want if you're having your in-laws stay there. Again, this is all personal preference, but I thought this drawing really gave you a nice idea of how to start thinking about those privacy considerations and how they might differ depending upon your planned uses. So another consideration I mentioned is daylight and where the sun is going, because that is one thing you don't have control over and can't change about your site. So you might as well maximize where you put your accessory dwelling unit for daylight, contribute to solar heat gain in the winter, or offer opportunities for rooftop solar installations. Is anybody interested or considering solar installation on their properties? I got some questions about it. Put them high up so you all can see each other. Okay, well, that's great because I have some information for you. I just wanted to share, if you weren't aware, that there is currently a residential clean energy federal tax credit. I am not a tax attorney, so please consult your tax attorney for details about participation in this program. But you can get a tax credit to support the installation of everything ranging from battery storage technology to solar electric panels and solar water heaters, along with other stuff. This credit will phase out in 2033, but if you build your project before then, you can get access to this. What's cool about this credit is that it's available for improvements to new or an existing primary residence. So again, this would have to go on your primary house, but if you're thinking about how these houses work in concert and your total energy load of your property might be something for you to consider. I also wanted to highlight the Yellowstone Bend Citizens Council, which is a local organization that has a campaign to help folks in our community solarize their properties. I have included in that packet of documents a little flyer from them. You can contact their official community organizer, Jack, by his email or phone number, which is listed on this slide and in the handout. But they can walk you through the installation process. They have a list of preferred providers, which is really helpful. So they can help you figure out, you know, which contractors to consider. And they can answer questions about payback period and working with Northwestern Energy because you'll have to tie into the grid. Awesome. So energy efficiency more broadly was also a topic that you all brought up and had questions about. So I wanted to highlight another federal tax credit called the Energy Efficient Home Improvement Tax Credit. This one is available for improvements or additions to an existing primary residence. So this would only be for folks who are retrofitting their home and adding an ADU to their existing primary residence. This isn't available for new builds. However, you get rebates for things like energy audits, exterior doors, windows, and skylights, insulation and air sealing materials, certain types of boilers and furnaces and heat pumps, biomass stoves. So if you wanted to upgrade your old wood stove or pellet stove to one that meets the EPA's standards, those are all things that could be covered under this tax credit. And you can claim the maximum annual credit every year that you make eligible improvements through 2032. So it's not just like a one and done. Like as you make those improvements, you can claim those credits. Northwestern Energy also has efficiency rebates. Has anybody gone through the process of accessing those? No? Okay, well, I'm happy to report that I did that this summer, and it's not too difficult. The rebates vary depending upon whether you are working on an existing home or on a new build. Both are eligible. And whether you have natural gas and or electric service. So rebates are available for a bunch of different things, depending upon sort of what category you fall into. but they include some of the same things that you can get a federal tax credit for, like insulation and air sealing materials, high efficiency boilers and furnaces. The rebate that I got was for a low flow shower head, which was on sale. And then I got an additional, like $20 back on the low flow shower head, and I got a couple of them. So that was just a nice little thing. It's not too intensive of a paperwork process. And again, if you want to just shave a little bit of money off of your costs, this is one way to do it. What I would like to highlight about this program is that they provide small rebates on a lot of Energy Star appliances if you're an existing electric customer. So again, these rebates are typically pretty small, but they can add up or be a significant part of the cost of an item, a single item, depending upon what that item is, especially if it's something like a shower head. So something to consider. To help you evaluate the impact of energy choices, there is this very cool and sophisticated tool online called the RMI Green Upgrade Calculator. And the image that you see on the screen is what you see when you navigate to the link that's on this slide. And it takes you through, as I mentioned, in great detail through all of the considerations around upgrading your home's existing features, like your furnace or boiler, windows, that kind of thing. Or if you actually just want to compare like a sort of traditional build with what you might think is a more efficient build, you could do it through this as well. You just kind of have to make up the specs of the traditional build. So you could plug your ADU specs into it. You'd need like the square footage and some other details. But it'll take you through and sort of spit some information out at the end to help you evaluate how worthwhile these improvements are. What's nice too is at the end, you can account for your incentives that you access. So if you plan on accessing any federal incentives or Northwestern Energy's incentives, then you can apply those. It also accounts for current appliances, your energy usage in your home, current energy rates. So it's quite detailed. So get ready to have a lot of information at your side when you use this tool, but it's a helpful way for you to start thinking about these things. I forgot to mention there is another rebate program that hasn't come online yet, but is slated to through the state Department of Environmental Quality, and that is their Montana Home Energy Rebates Program. And these will be targeted to households with specific income brackets, or at least that's my understanding at this point. But keep your eyes open for more information that will help you determine your eligibility. And you can just Google like DEQ Montana Home Energy Rebates Program, and their website will come up. But they've been having they've been inviting a lot of community feedback and solicitation to help them design and roll out a program. I provided some feedback to say, hey, it would be great if you provided these rebates to new builds and not just retrofits. But I'm sure that you all have some great comments to add. So I recommend keeping your eye on that process. All right. So I mentioned a wildfire buffer zone. And in your list of flyers in front of you, you should have this Own Your Zone handout. This was created by Headwaters Economics to help folks understand and mitigate their risks from wildfires. And why this is important is that embers can travel 1 or more miles to ignite, a vulnerable home or landscaping. So you don't have to be right next to a blazing fire for your home or your landscaping to ignite. What is great about this handout is that it has really clear priorities for making your design more resilient to fire. And at the top of the list is installing a Class 8A rated roof. You remember that Paradise Valley zoning district randomly had this little building code element in it and said you wanted a Class A or B rated roof. Well, if you're going to build to this higher standard of fire resilience, you want that Class A rated roof. Then you can look at things like, removing roof and yard debris. So clean your gutter, clean all the leaves from under your deck, all that kind of stuff, to creating a buffer zone of 5 feet around your home of materials that won't ignite. So you can go down the list and think about which of these sort of design considerations you can fit into your project and prioritize. But I think this is a very useful handout, at least for me, in understanding, what I should do to make my home more resilient to fire. I guess, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. There's a link where you can find out more information from Headwaters on this slide. And I'm sure they would be delighted to talk to you. Reach out to them about it. Now here is some fun stuff that you asked for. Folks were like, where can I see plans of ADUs? Well, the internet is awash in pre-approved plans, particularly from California and Oregon, although there are some that are being developed for Colorado. I haven't found any that have been developed for Montana yet. But if you Google pre-approved ADU plans, you will find them. I wanted to highlight a few. Here we have from the city of Sacramento and the city of Los Angeles. What you'll usually see is that there might be 1 or 2 plans that are available totally for free, and then some additional plans that you can reach out to an architecture firm and pay for like I wouldn't say like nominal, but a smaller fee, like $500, $600. So the city of Sacramento has 3 free plans of different sizes. The city of LA has 1 free plan, and you can see it's kind of like funky shape that you remember from that little site planning guide earlier. But it provides a lot of really great inspiration. The city of Eugene has 1, and then 8 additional ones that are available for purchase. And I think what's interesting about one of those ones for purchase available through the city of Eugene is that it's net zero or super low energy. So again, if that's a priority for you, there is a plan out there that achieves that. Of course, it's for the climate in Eugene. So you probably want to have a local person look at it. I wanted to highlight the city of Concord, California's plans, because they have 6 free plans and they have all these different fun configurations. I know for my lot, I would probably want like a long, narrow accessory dwelling unit, but you might want like a little L shape or more of a square or some other different shape. And this gives you an opportunity to look at them. So again, really, really great inspiration, and also a great way to get familiarized with what a set of plans look like if you're not used to looking at them. Obviously, the ones in California are going to have all of these different build standards than ones we're likely to see here. An interesting homework assignment that I might consider assigning you is, if you are curious about any of these plans, I would encourage you to take them to a builder and see whether they think they could draw up a set that complies with our local building codes and would be suitable for our climate. I also want to highlight available designs for manufactured or mobile homes. Woodland Ridge Tiny Home Crafters is builds manufactured homes here in Livingston. They have kind of case studies of a bunch of different homes on their website, including the Blanton family tiny homes, which were featured in our ADU tour last month. Kit Custom Home Builders is also a builder of manufactured housing that I believe is based out of Idaho, but sells their manufactured homes through a bunch of different outlets, including American Home Centers in Belgrade. And I wanted to highlight them because they offer models that are what are called NEEM certified. And that is just like a higher level of energy efficiency that goes through a third-party certification process. So if you really want your home to be airtight, but you're not having it site built, that might be one certification you can look for. I just want to say that these options among many, many, many for manufactured homes. So another great idea or another great way that you can get exposed to how a home feels and what size might be appropriate is just to go to one of these places in our region that sells mobile and manufactured homes and just walk around it. Even if you don't necessarily plan on having a mobile or manufactured home or that's not permitted on your site, it should give you a feel for like the size and some layout considerations. What you can often see too is when you're looking at mobile and manufactured homes is their layouts online. So that's another source of layout inspiration. So I highly recommend just sort of Googling around for that. And these are two that have come across my desk. So it's 7:23. That was the whole design section. As fast as can be. Any questions about some of the stuff that we covered? Or I would actually just love to open it up and hear from you all whether anyone's planning, like considering a mobile or manufactured home, or whether they've already have sources of design inspiration they want to share with the group.
I have a question that I am certain nobody in this room is also going to have, so I could ask you later, but is it even legal to fix up a garage, put a bathroom in it, and have a vehicle in it? Is that legal? And who would I ask for that? I was just speaking with a friend and just the fumes of a vehicle and, you know, would that even be legal to be in a space that somebody would live in?
Well, I
Very
think
small space.
that's the kicker, I think, is you can have a garage with a bathroom, but you probably can't have an actively used garage with a bathroom that somebody is also living in, right? Because of the carbon monoxide exposure. So yeah, that would be a pretty serious health hazard. You wouldn't
Okay.
wanna-
Okay.
I don't do permitting anymore. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You probably want those used separate. Tim?
Those out of the box designs that you had offered up, that you said that they were pre-approved, but pre-approved by whom? By the entity that, where they were built, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they're approved, that the design's approved for us here.
That's correct. They're pre-approved in the jurisdictions that it is issuing them. So interestingly, the plans in Eugene, Oregon were actually given to the city of Portland, who then updated them slightly for their zoning environment and other standards. So these may or may not, depending upon how you situate them on their lot and their dimensions and everything, they may or may not meet your standards. But in terms of building code, I can't tell you that whatever is in these plans would meet local building code. But if you're building in the county, there is no building code. So if you situated it on your lot and you met setback and height requirements and so on and so forth, potentially that could be an avenue for you. But I would strongly recommend that you take them to your local builder or architect and say, what can we do with this? And you use this for design inspiration and not just building. I mean, I suppose if you yourself are a builder, you could probably follow those plans and figure it out, but yeah. But again, they were built or they were created with the issuing jurisdiction's requirements in mind, not with the city of Livingston or Park County's requirements. Any further questions? Comments? Is anybody considering manufactured or mobile home for their property?
Sort of.
Yeah.
We looked at it, is roughly, and this is for us, the price to get a tiny home versus building it yourself. Unfortunately, it's not that. So, and in some respects, you can probably build a slightly larger than what a tiny home is going to be for about the same amount. And I love Corey and what he's doing, but
Yeah.
they're not cheap.
Yeah, they aren't. Well, and again, that's why I recommend looking at, there are tiny homes that are mobile and there are other side, like there are manufactured homes that are larger as well. And yeah, like you said, Pam, one of the primary benefits is just getting it on your property.
Yeah, and given, I mean, on the one hand, it means that you don't have to hire a contractor, you don't have to deal with this. You just, pick your design from what they offer and they deliver it. But probably the time from when you write the check to when they deliver it is probably comparable to what the time would be to have a contractor come in and build something. I love the whole concept and everything, but for people who just don't want to deal, it's a great solution.
Awesome.
Also worth considering whether it's permitted in your zoning district.
Yes, exactly. I just remembered, I have just a couple more slides about your home fit guides, which are also in the stack of paper in front of you. So if you can stick around for just a couple more minutes, I'd love to highlight some of what is in these guides so that you know how to keep them moving forward. So the home fit guide is basically just all about making homes safe and livable for people at all ages and stages of life. And AARP surveys find consistently that older adults want to remain in their current homes and communities for as long as possible. That's what inspired them to create this guide. However, they also found that barely 1% of the nation's housing includes universal design features, making it accessible for folks in a wheelchair, for example. And that's where this guide comes in. It basically just, helps individuals and families make their current or future residence their lifelong home. So some of the costs of not staying in your home include, especially if you think you are aging out of your current home, might include private duty home health aides, adult daycare, assisted living, nursing homes, that kind of stuff, which can get quite expensive. So the Home Fit Guide outlines a bunch of different interventions, which I will not go through all tonight because otherwise we'd be here for an hour. But they identify some quick fixes, and then they also identify some things to enhance visitability. So there are 3 categories of quick fixes. One is just installing smoke and carbon monoxide detectors on every level of your home, which I'm sure you're doing, but as a friendly reminder. Also, that needs to happen in any home with a fully running appliance, fireplace, or attached garage. They also recommend installing fire extinguishers and water heaters. So the kitchen needs an ABC rated fire extinguisher. And then for water heaters, they recommend checking your shower valves to ensure they're pressure balanced and setting your water heater for 120 degrees Fahrenheit or less to prevent scalding. Apparently, some health professionals will say you could bump that up, but generally speaking, set it at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Could somebody turn off their ringer? Row rugs and step stools, another super easy fix. Row rugs can be a trip hazard, so they should be removed and replaced with cushioned, slip-resistant mats. You can also select step stools with grip handles and non-slip surfaces. Again, really quick and easy fixes to make your home safer if you don't have a lot of time. And then these are the 3 requirements of visitability, which you can implement to ensure that your home is accessible to folks in wheelchairs or who have limited mobility. Visibility.org is a website hosted by the National Council on Independent Living. And that's the organization that came up with these 3 requirements, which are also included in your Home Fit Guide. So one is a 0-step entrance. This is what a 0-step entrance looks like. This is another one of the ADUs that was featured in the Livingston tour earlier this year. Basically, you don't have to go up or down a step to enter the home. This example also features some other recommendations from the Home Fit Guide, including a covered overhang over the front door and a place to sit. You don't have to have every entrance into the home be zero step. You could just designate certain points, like, for example, your garage. Ramps could be included into your design to go from a stepped entryway to a zero step entryway. Or you could work on grading around your accessory dwelling unit to raise it up a little bit while still providing that zero step entry. So there are some different types of ramps that are shown on this slide, and you can consider implementing those. The second condition of visibility is 32-inch or more doorway openings. This is typically a less expensive fix because you can increase the clear width in your doorway by installing swing clear hinges. This allows enough space for a wheelchair to pass through. They also mentioned that the clear height of the door should be at least 80 inches. So again, just making it easier for people to come into your home and move through the space. And then the third element is having a wheelchair accessible bathroom. This is typically a more expensive fix, but again, you want those doorways with a 32-inch clear width. Wheelchair users need at least 5 feet of open space to maneuver into and turn around in a room. So if you can make your bathroom that big, we encourage you to do that. Also, a standard 32-inch wall-mounted or open-base sink is usually usable with a wheelchair, but you could also just like take the doors off of and like the take plate off of your existing sink to make it more accessible for those in a wheelchair. They recommend a doorless shower with a zero-step entry and a permanent shower seat, an adjustable height handheld shower head, and grab bars that are installed into supportive blocking. They definitely say that the grab bars that just stick onto the side of your shower are a no-no, so don't do that. It'll work. There you go. Yeah, they're not going to help you if you really need them. So those are the key conditions of visibility and just sort of a very light touch of what you might find in your home fit guide. They recommend choosing a quick fix that you can tackle within the next 3 months. So that will probably also be part of your homework. You can test it out on your primary dwelling and see what you want to implement on your ADU. So yeah, you can, I will also be sending out a little home fit handout with like a little checklist that you can fill out if you like to document your progress. So that's that about the home fit guide. And before we adjourn for today, I'll share some homeowner wisdom, largely about construction tips, because construction and property management is our next topic in December. Namely, plan things taking longer than expected, sometimes a lot longer. Think about the work triangle of time, money, and quality, and that you can only have 2 of those. You can't have all 3 at the same time. This was from a contractor, actually. And then have clear communication and coordination plans with all of your team members. One homeowner in particular recommended requesting daily reports from your contractors, just so you stay on schedule. Again, obviously, as Deb brought up last time, this will depend upon how much interaction you're planning to have on your project, whether you're planning to project manage yourself or whether you're delegating that. But this is what we're hearing from homeowners who frequently did it themselves. So homework, I'll be sending out another Google form by Friday, November 15th. So please complete that by then. Again, with feedback on today's session, yikes, unanswered questions and questions about construction and property management, so we can tailor the next session to you. And then continue narrowing down your design and filling in your budget worksheets. So yeah, and reach out to me with any questions. And we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Matt. Have a nice night.
You could be sending that last email to me.
Yeah.
I got it. I had forgotten to add it to this copy.